If you struggle with doing clean, crisp French tip nails using dip powder, in today's video I'll show you how to jazz it up and camouflage that no one will know any different. This will also be my slow transition into holiday manis, starting with retro Christmas color vibes. So if you want to see how I create this fun retro Christmas French tip dip powder mani, stick around, we're getting into it. The colors I'm going to be using for today's mani are 3 of the colors from the Retro Christmas collection from West Coast Dips that just recently released, and it was kind of all inspired by this glitter Retro Christmas because I just thought it was so fun and so pretty, and I love a good non-traditional holiday set. The base for my French tips is going to be from the Naturel collection, which is also a newer release. So this is number 2 that I'm using. And in the collection, there's actually 9 different shades. And they're all sheer, but they're very buildable. And you probably saw in my intro clip that this shade is just perfect for my skin tone. It kind of looked like I was wearing clear, but I like that it had a tint of color to kind of hide any imperfections. I've been loving wearing my short natural nails lately, but I did decide that I wanted to file down my almonds, so I'm back down to my square nails because I can't seem to make up my mind on what shape I want. For the base of my mani, I don't want to contaminate my entire jar of All Naturel too, so I will be using my Chaos Gemerald by Chaos Concepts and doing pour over method, and that way if I contaminate my powder, it's just going to be a little bit that I have in my Chaos Gemerald rather than the entire jar of it. And for the French tip, I do recommend using some sort of French dip tray, so I'm going to be using my Dipped in Chaos by Chaos Concepts as my French dip tray. This was printed with the incline at the bottom with the French tip in mind, so it is perfect for that. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour my entire jar of my dip powder into my Dipped in Chaos. And for a French tip, you want to make sure that your powder is level, so make sure you kind of shake it and tap it against the table just to make sure your powder is even and level. For my liquids, I'll also be using my West Coast Dips dip liquids, and I do like that the dip base is about a medium dry time, so it doesn't dry too quickly on me, so I have enough time to complete this French tip. So I'm going to start off like I do for any dip powder nails that I do, with applying my dip base, and it's going to be to my entire nail, so I don't have to worry about dip base only at the tip where I want the French tip. It's going to be application on my entire nail, and once I've got that covered, I'm going to take my Dipped in Chaos with Garland, which is my green color, and I'm going to slowly angle my finger into that dip powder to get my tip covered in Garland. And the more angled in you go, the more curved your smile line is, so it's just really personal preference. So I do like to let the powder sit for a second just to let it absorb in. I tap my finger downwards to remove the excess dip powder, and then I'm just pouring over All Naturel onto the rest of the wet dip base to absorb in and be my base color for the rest of my nail. After every dip that I do, I want to make sure that my powder is level again before I do my next French tip. So I made sure to tap my Dipped in Chaos against the table to level out the powders. And so now I'm going to do the same process with my thumb, also using Garland. Now I will say that the 2 colors that I did use for my French tips are heavy shimmers. It is better to do a French tip with solids. They are a lot easier to work with. So these shimmers particularly that I worked with, they were a little staticky, I guess I'll say. So they didn't really stay just at the French tip line. I did have some kind of static attraction that made the line a little blurry, which is why I'm going to use some glitter to kind of jazz it up and hide those imperfections of the French tip line. So definitely always better to use solid dip powders when you're doing a French tip mani. Once I get into Gooseberries, which is the pink dip powder that I'll be using for some other French tips, you'll see a little more of what I was talking about because it is a little more obvious with the pink dip powder. I feel like it was a little more staticky than Garland. Once again, I'm going to make sure that my dip powder is level again before I start with my French tip. So going in for my second layer, I'm going to apply a thin, even layer of dip base to my entire nail. But because my French tip is a darker color and it is a shimmer, I don't want to contaminate the base part of my nail that has the Au Naturel #2. So I'm starting with that area of my nail first, and then I will apply dip base over garland. And I'm going to use my first layer as my guide for garland. So I want to make sure that I can match up my second layer to the first layer, or as much as possible. So I'm just using my first layer as my guide. Once I have that, I'm going to let that sit for a second, tap my finger downwards for that excess powder to fall off, and then I'm going to pour over my Au Naturel #2 to the rest of my nail to absorb the rest of that dip base. I'm just interrupting for a minute just to show you what I'm talking about. So I am slowly guiding my finger into gooseberries to create that French tip. So you can see it's clean and even, and then I tap off the excess powder, and you can see that the powder kind of flew onto the wet dip base outside of the French tip line. So it kind of created like a blurry line rather than a crisp French tip line. Because of this, I decided to try something different to see if that would fix my issue or at least make it a little bit better. So I was thinking that maybe because even though I pointed my finger downwards when I tapped off my excess powder, so away from the additional wet dip base, I thought maybe that was causing the powders to kind of fly a little bit more onto the wet dip base. So I decided instead of tapping off the excess powder, I would do my French tip line. I would let that sit for a minute, just point my finger downwards, but not tap it, just in case there's any excess powder that wanted to fall on its own. But then I would pour over with a spoon rather than the whole jar, the Au Naturel onto the rest of my nail. And my thought was that I didn't want to contaminate all my Au Naturel, which is why I didn't just do a pour over like I did for my other finger. I wanted just to use as little powder as possible because you can see in my Chaos Gemerald that there's pink mixed in there now. So this is contaminated powder that's going to go in my dump jar rather than back into the original jar. And that did help. It didn't fix the issue, but it definitely did help doing it this method rather than what I was doing before. This glitter is Retro Christmas, and this was too beautiful not to use. So it's going to go on my ring finger as a whole nail of just glitter because I just couldn't help myself. So I love that this is a mixture of different size glitter. So you've got the small, medium, and large glitters. And then it's also got different colors, so it kind of matches gooseberries and garland. So my green and my pink in here. So it's got green and pink, and then there's some blue. It's just a really beautiful mixture of colors. So I'm using my chunky glitter method for this. So for the first layer, I just poured over the glitter into my Chaos Gemerald, and that way I'm only catching really more of the finer glitters, the smaller glitters, the acrylic powder. I don't really want to have a lot of the chunkier glitter pieces in my first layer, and that's because I want to reduce bulkiness. So really, I just want to focus on catching more of the finer stuff in my first layer. For my second layer, I poured my entire jar of Retro Christmas into my Chaos Gemerald, and I shook it just to bring some of the larger glitter pieces to the surface because they are heavier and they will sink. And my second layer, I want more coverage of those larger glitter pieces. So I just laid my finger flat in, which is why I shook it to bring those glitters to the surface. And then laying in, make sure that I pick up more of those pieces. So you can see here, I've got really good coverage. You can see a lot of the glitters, and that's what really I want on my second layer. So I'm just trying to adjust some of the glitters that may be like half on my nail, half off my nail. And then I'm also pressing down to make sure that they're laying flat, which these were really thin glitter, so I didn't have any issues really with them sticking up, but I want to make sure that everything's laying flat to reduce the risk of me filing through any of these colors, because colored glitters generally have a silver center, so if you file through them, it's definitely very noticeable. I kept everything in clear, activated, and filed and buffed off camera. And as you can see, my French tip lines aren't very crisp. So that's when I decided I'm going to use some of that glitter, jazz it up a little bit, and camouflage those lines. I decided to use gel for this so I could take my time with applying the glitters, but you definitely can just use dip base. You just have to work a bit quicker. So I applied a little bit of that gel base to my resin palette, and then I've got my line art brush from West Coast Dips as well. So I'm just going to take some of that gel base in my gel liner, and I'm just going to apply a bit of that gel base around my smile line of my French tip nail. And I'm going to do a little bit above and below because I'm not really sure where I'm going to place the glitters just yet. So I want to make sure that I've got coverage, but I don't need to do my entire nail because the glitter's only going to go around that smile line. So I'm just taking the same liner brush that I was using to apply the gel base to my nail to try to pick up the individual glitters. And I figured it probably wouldn't be a big deal because I'm not dipping it into the powder and getting like those finer powders and glitters. I just really wanted to pick up individual glitter pieces. And I thought it'd be easier because it already had the gel base on there. But I feel like because since it's a brush, you know, the bristles are soft, so I couldn't like press it up against a piece of glitter to pick it up. So I found it a little more difficult. So eventually I just switched back to my orange wood stick because that makes it a lot easier to pick up the individual glitters. So I'm just kind of randomly doing a design. I think for this one, I just did like one larger glitter in the center of my smile line and then smaller glitters around the rest of it. For my other nails, I do other random designs just to change it up a bit. But you know, you can do whatever you want. It's up to you on how you want your design to look. Now I'm just adjusting the glitters a little bit just to make sure they're all lined up, and this is exactly why I wanted to use gel base for this, so that I could take my time, do kind of my initial placement and kind of adjust it. And then once I'm happy with the placement of the glitters, I'm just going to give it a flash cure for 10 to 15 seconds in my lamp. I just want to make sure they don't move on me, but I'm not going to give it a full cure until I'm done with all my nails. I went ahead and finished up the rest of my nails off camera, and I gave them a full cure in my lamp for 30 seconds. And I also took a lint-free wipe and some isopropyl alcohol, and I wiped down my nails because gel base does have a tacky layer. So if there's any of that gel base I didn't end up covering with a piece of glitter, I want to make sure I'm removing that tacky layer because I am going to use my dip top coat. So for my dip top coat, I do need one final layer of activator. So I'm just applying one layer of activator to all my nails, and I'm going to let that dry for 2 minutes. Once 2 minutes have passed, I'm going to go in with my first layer of my dip top coat. So for my first layer of top coat, I'm going to apply it in 2 to 3 really quick swipes on each nail. I want to make sure that I'm wiping my brush on a lint-free wipe in between each nail in case there's any activator on the brush. And then once I'm done with my 5th nail, I'm ready to go in with my second layer of dip top coat. And I know I'm ready because it'll start looking a little dull and wrinkly. It won't look as shiny. So for my second coat, I'm going to go in, I'm going to make sure my entire nail is covered, and I'm also going to make sure that I'm capping my free edge. As always, I'm going to finish off my mani by rehydrating my cuticles with my Scales of a Mermaid cuticle oil. This is in the scent Suga Suga, which is a limited edition scent from last year, I believe. And this is a creme brulee scent, and I was so excited when she released this because creme brulee is one of my favorite desserts. I just love cracking the top of that burnt sugar. It is just so good. And my cuticles were looking especially crusty because of this colder weather, so I went ahead and did both my hands because they both needed the hydration really badly. And also, I do have an ambassador code with Scales of a Mermaid, so if there's anything you're interested in, you can always use my code GENIE10 to save 10% off your orders. And here we are with the finished look. What do you think? I love how fun this mani is. It was all kind of centered around the glitter retro Christmas, and I just love the kind of subtle Christmas vibes to it. It's not just very in your face, and the colors are just so pretty. And hopefully I was able to camouflage those imperfect smile lines and just made it a little more fun with the glitter placement. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up. It lets me know to continue creating content like this, and it also helps YouTube recommend me to others, which helps grow my channel. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. I upload content every Monday and Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.